In 1996, motorsports saw the culmination of one of the biggest paradigm shifts in its history in America, the IndyCar split, which nearly killed IndyCar racing forever. With IndyCar splitting in two, splitting its racing fan, and in a lot of ways having them completely disgusted to the point of leaving IndyCar, it opened up the door for NASCAR to see exceptional growth in America and grow the largest point that any motorsport league in American history has ever seen, averaging nearly 10 million viewers a week. And while this is amazing to see in hindsight, especially where NASCAR is today, what's even more amazing is that this may not have even happened because of NASCAR getting in its own way and NASCAR having a self-imposed split. So this stuff all starts back in the 80s and 90s. In the 80s and the early 90s, NASCAR started to see a bit of a footing growing on the national and mainstream market. There were movies being made about it. There were drivers being featured in commercials. There were better TV deals. And it was looking like NASCAR was going to build itself up more and more. And with this, it brought unprecedented growth. And with unprecedented growth brings unprecedented ideas. And in 1994, this is where Bruton Smith, the CEO and main figurehead behind Speedway Motorsports Inc., or SMI, comes in. See, Bruton Smith, well before the split had ever come in IndyCar, actually had proposed to do a sort of split in NASCAR. This was his idea, is to split up the NASCAR top level to make the sport grow to greater heights in his eyes. His idea was to split the Cup Series into two divisions or conferences. The divisions could be based off of geography, similar to what ARCA has today, like an American National League like the NFL or MLB, or just something completely different based on driver talent. And this would give the Cup more areas and tracks to reach in his mind. Like any other sports league, they'd meet at big events like Crown Jewels, the Daytona 500, Brickyard 400, Southern 500, as well as a finale, which had a championship culmination of a winner-take-all race for the Winston Cup. In a lot of ways, this is the birth and origin of the current playoff format that we have today, where you would have drivers competing in both conferences and sort of just have the best of those have the winner-take-all race against each other, whether it be a Final 4, 6, 8, 10, whatever it might be. This was the way that NASCAR had really started looking at, in an idea of any sort, a chase or a playoff. This would split Cup stars and drivers to each conference, as well as creating field fillers in the process. Benny Parsons actually was kind of for the idea and proposed merging the Busch Series and Cup Series teams in a way to get full fields in both conferences. A full field at the time being 43 cars, meaning that in any given weekend, 86 Cup cars could be competing. To put it in perspective of how unprecedented and how radical this idea was, the only time that NASCAR ever really was close to having that many entries in a weekend was the inaugural Brickyard 400, which was one of an unprecedented and historical weekend events in NASCAR history. Well, this stuff started to stew over 94 through 95 and 96, and in 97 started to gain a little traction in the media. In 97, once again, Smith brought up the idea to split the Cup Series up again. A tier system with top teams and then everybody else in the other. One proposition would be that multiple drivers share cars throughout this season and sometimes races, and each be experienced and specialized with certain tracks, like super speedways, road courses, intermediates, and short tracks. This, of course, brought a lot of pushback. Clay Campbell, the president of Martinsville Speedway, had said, "I've heard that one being kicked around. I don't think it's a good idea. Look at the Winston Cup crowds versus those in the Grand National or Truck Series. That's what splitting up the Winston Cup would be like. There's maybe enough talent to do a split, but not enough names." And this is kind of echoed by Kevin Triplett, the NASCAR communications manager, who had said, "I don't think we're ready for two divisions of Winston Cup. A lot of people forget or don't realize that we run 12 divisions of racing now. Do we need another?" He also said, "Never say never," and saw no reason for it. Right now, we have a very good product. But when you grow and change as fast as we are, and are becoming as popular as we've become, it wouldn't be proper to say never and back yourself into a corner. Mike Helton also would say that the problem we have splitting up the series is presently it works. It works real well. And generally, you don't screw with something that works this well. What makes Winston Cup racing attractive and appealing is all the personalities, and they're performing with each other every week. If you had Dale Earnhardt running in Richmond and at some time Jeff Gordon is running in Texas, I'm not sure that would work. But even though there were detractors, there were supporters. The previously mentioned Benny Parsons had said, "I think that the sport is big enough to make it happen." Where Dale Earnhardt runs 30 races a year in one division and Rusty Wallace runs 30 races a year in another. And they may not race each other in 20 to 25 of those. I don't see any way out of this. And current driver Dale Jarrett had said, it makes a lot of sense because so many tracks want to get in and get involved, and we certainly don't want to get rid of any tracks we do have. We also have a lot of teams wanting to come in. We only start 40 or 42 cars, less than that in some short tracks. That creates a problem. I think that something like that would add to our sport, and the fans wouldn't be missing out at all, because there would be plenty of competition in both. It would certainly step our sport up to sort of a major league level that other people around the country feel we need to be at. So from 94 to 97, Smith was continuing to lobby Bill France Jr. for this. The general public response was mixed and skeptical at best. Many saw this as a way for Smith to protect SMI tracks from losing dates. Remember that this is right after, especially in 97, right after North Wilkesboro lost its 2 dates so that New Hampshire and Texas could get more. And this also was at the same time in 1997 that Bruton Smith was lobbying for Texas to have a second date. Some thought that maybe he wanted to split with NASCAR. I do find it funny that literally every single problem that is major in the late 90s and 2000s when it comes to tracks always seems to trace back to Bruton Smith and his Texas plans. But what all of this leads to is January 13th, 1998 at NASCAR's media tour, where Smith opened up Pandora's box with his comments. He said at it with confidence, "I think it's inevitable. Our sport is growing faster than any other pro sport in the country, and there's no end in sight. We need about twice as many races right now. Anytime you try something this dramatic, there's going to be problems at the start. But who knows? How many potential Gordons or Earnhardts might be out there? More races means more good drivers get a chance to prove themselves." And on face value, a lot of this is true. When you have a finite amount of seats, races, and everything else in NASCAR, obviously there's going to be some great drivers that are left out or just never get noticed. And you don't want to cut tracks. But you have to look with more nuance. Pushback had really ramped up, as Robert Yates had said that the field of cars at the time was not deep enough right now, and that fans want to see the best drivers in one race. That being true, and the fact that really, as fun as the 90s are to look back on, the amount of competition and level of competition was nowhere near as high as the way it is in even today or the last 10 to 15 years. Also, media left and right was shooting this idea down, many claiming that it was a step backwards for the sport to diminish its popularity by splitting its talent pool in half. Others predicted an open-wheel style split like they'd seen 2 years before with IRL and CART, and it was pitting the France family, NASCAR and ISC, against the Smith family and SMI. NASCAR's most powerful being portrayed in a power struggle. NASCAR's comment with Bill France Jr. was just, "We don't think that it would be wise." Still, France wasn't closed off from large changes and big ideas. NASCAR at the time had plans to expand into markets like Denver, Sacramento, Atlantic City, Kansas City, Miami, and Chicago. The last 3 of those all had races on the schedule by 2001. And he also pushed back and pushed for tracks like Atlanta, which was owned by Smith and SMI, to continue renovations if they wanted to stick around and not be booted from the schedule, which was a bold shot across the bow. An option to bring new markets in like these that France brought up. And because of these massive changes, there were some options that France and NASCAR were putting forward that could accommodate these kind of tracks and markets being added in. And one of those was actually to divide NASCAR up like Smith had proposed. Another was to remove dates from tracks with 2 dates and see if they can get as many tracks as possible, or a double driver system like previously proposed, or just extending the schedule from 33 races to 36. NASCAR was not keen on the conference approach, as France had said it's a dilemma. We may split racing someday, but not today, not in the immediate future. I don't think 2 parts would be as good as the whole. And over time, this idea really faded away from the NASCAR side of things, as they chose the option of expanding the schedule from 33 to 36 races, which is a schedule blueprint that is now, as of the current day, on its 22nd season in NASCAR. Bruton Smith did try to create his own series with track, the Team Racing Auto Circuit, which raced exclusively at SMI tracks, but it didn't last much longer than a year or 2 and was quickly defunct. It's interesting, though, with NASCAR's thoughts, as at the time they said in 1998 they wanted to keep what was working, but by 2004 had the chase, and it began the era of changes in the Brian France era. Now, why would splitting NASCAR up like this never work? Well, for one, the supermajority of teams are based in the Charlotte, North Carolina area and the surrounding areas. So it would be really hard for them to travel halfway across the country every week if they were in a Western Conference, while the Eastern Conference teams could stay pretty close to home. Also, the growth of NASCAR at the time. It was something that was really big, and making huge, giant changes like this was not something that would add to that growth. Plus, the growth itself was unsustainable. Also, oversaturation would be a huge problem, because if NASCAR went and doubled their races like Smith wanted, they'd have 66 to probably 70 races a year, which really, oversaturation is a problem NASCAR has now with 38 weeks a year. Can you imagine doubling what they have and trying to keep people around? And then greed. It was a greedy proposition by Smith, and it was a proposition that in the end would only line the pockets of those up top, while everybody else from fans to teams to drivers would suffer for it. Remember that Bruton Smith is the same guy who said Kentucky would be bigger than the Daytona 500. And how's Kentucky doing right now? Yeah, that's what I thought. Now, with all that, I want to pass this all on to you. What do you think the motorsports world in America especially would look like today if there was a split with NASCAR done in the 90s before the big boom? Let me know down in the comments below. While you're at it, leave a like on this video, share this video, and subscribe to my channel for more great NASCAR content. To all my channel members, thank you so much for your support in this difficult time. And until next time, have a good one.